Welcome to the Not Old Better Show. I'm your host, Paul Vogelzang. We've got another great show today, and an important one. You know, whether it's illness, injury, cancer, a new baby, we've all been in the position of caring for a loved one. I've talked about my own situation just recently and how exhausting and fulfilling it was at the same time to help my dad through his health challenges. Honestly, I wish I'd known a bit more at the time about my guest today and his business. We're going to be talking to HomeCareAssist CEO Brian VanHook, who, along with his wife Blair, founded the company HomeCareAssist out of a desire to raise home care standards, identify the best options for families. Brian calls this group careseekers, and the best options for caregivers, thereby revolutionizing how this process works.
The easiest thing I could say about HomeCareAssist is we're revolutionizing the way that care seekers and caregivers are able to connect to find quality in home care.
That, of course, is our guest today, HomeCareAssist CEO and founder Brian VanHook, who will be joining us today from his offices in North Carolina via Skype. Brian VanHook, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate it. It's good to talk to you. Of course, home care is on everybody's mind, but let's start with you. Give us a little background, how you first started in this business and what led to your commitment to it.
We started, this goes back for me probably about 10 years ago. We had a situation where we were in the need for home care for a family member, and doing research in the home care field, which I knew very little about at the time, we realized that there was just a lack of consistency in the quality of what was provided and the resources out there. And so at the time I told my wife, hey, we need to give the people what they deserve in home care to keep these people at home with dignity and respect. So my wife and I actually 9 years ago started a actual brick and mortar home care agency here in the Triangle area. And we're still in operation. We're still humming along with the agency. But one of the things I found out 10 years ago doing my research is home care agencies are great for some people, but there was still a gap in the resources. And the resources that were available, unfortunately, 10 years ago were pretty much the same resources that are available today. So, that kind of planted the seed for HomeCareAssist 10 years ago. And then with a growing business with the agency, it kind of got put on the back burner. And up until about 3 years ago, I kind of rekindled the flame to say, that those resources still aren't being fulfilled for people and what they deserve. And the home care agencies are limited on who they can serve and what they can do. So we really need to move forward with this HomeCareAssist idea. So that's really was the birth of HomeCareAssist for us.
That's great. Thank you for that summary. And of course, by the Triangle area, you are referring to the North Carolina area around Raleigh?
Yes,
Yep.
Raleigh, North Carolina.
Good.
Yes, sir.
And your wife is still in the business with you, and what's her name?
Her name is Blair, and she is part of the agency, some of the day-to-day operations there, but she's very involved with the development and the growth of HomeCareAssist.
Good. Well, tell us now a little bit about what HomeCareAssist really is then.
So HomeCareAssist.com is really an online resource for those folks that are looking for in-home care, and really even a step before that when they're not even sure if they need in-home care. We have a lot of resources on our website that allow people to determine, do they have a loved one or themselves that need care, what type of care they may need, and then we also are a fulfillment center for that as far as an online network. So we have two different user bases with caregivers, and those are the people that are providing the care to those that need it. And then what we term as care seekers, and those are the people that are looking for care, and it could either be for themselves or for a loved one. So it's the easiest way to think about it, Paul, is think about like eHarmony for in-home care.
Good. I like that. Well, I read in my research of you, of course, I read a little bit about this notion of a gap that you identified.
Yes, sir.
Describe the gap and tell us why that's a distinction, certainly, in this industry.
10 years ago in my research to start the agency, I realized that as much as I was passionate about the agency and growing the agency to fulfill those needs, there was still a gap. And in doing my research then and even now to this day, what I find is when people are at that point in life where they may need in-home care, you've got a few resources. You can go to family, friends, maybe a church member, and ask them for help. One of the things I've noticed with that in my experience is that puts a lot of strain on those relationships. So particularly with a family member, it can put a big strain on a family member's relationship with who they're providing care for. So it may be a great short-term option. I've never really seen it work out great in the long term. Then the other way is with the licensed brick and mortar home care agency, and you're getting the full service in-home care. You're paying a little bit higher of a price for it, but they're going to take care of the scheduling and the billing. And some of the agencies are running under licenses. Some states don't have licenses for their home care agencies, so there's a lot of inconsistencies across the board. And then the other option is more of the traditional online job posting sites, where you can go on a site, post a job, and say, here's what I need, and then you have anywhere from 10 to 1,000 people applying for that job. And so you're back at step one trying to screen those people, and it's very inefficient, and there's a lot of risk with the screening process of those caregivers that you may be wanting to hire. That for me, that's the gap. We wanted to find a way to give a resource to people that can be trusted and efficient with their time.
And so that gap that you've identified, that you've really brought to practice with HomeCareAssist, that allows for kind of a better way to vet caregivers for families. This was an issue for my family not too long ago, and I think it's an important point that you need to make and emphasize, that this solution really gives this better kind of identification for the caregivers and the care seekers.
Yeah, you're correct on that, Paul, and that's been one of the problems with the online resources. I mean, our society today, everything's going online. What's being overlooked, though, is that going online, you're going at it somewhat blind and throwing darts at a wall. So what we do at HomeCareAssist.com is we take that fear of who you're hiring, and we try to minimize and vet, and we bring caregivers to you that we've already vetted. We use a national third-party online background screening. Unlike some of the other online job posting sites, nobody is on our site as a caregiver until they have passed that screening. So it gives a little bit higher comfort level. We require resources, references and resources for the caregivers so that they state what type of qualifications or certifications. We also verify those certifications when they put it on their resume or their profile. And so when you as a care seeker go to the site, you're going to be looking at people that have already passed all those screening processes. So anyone on our site, they're screened, they're vetted, and then you're able to communicate with them directly through our secure site.
We are with Brian VanHook. Brian and his wife Blair started HomeCareAssist at HomeCareAssist.com. Brian, I mentioned that my family and I were care seekers. Mm-hmm. Tell the audience a little bit about what are the things that a care seeker needs to look for.
Yeah, there's a lot, and anyone, as you know, Paul, personally, anyone that's gone through it, it's a bit overwhelming. So, the first thing I try to do when I'm talking to families is make sure you understand what the needs are, and be rational with those needs. So, if it's somebody that needs help with bathing or dressing, you want to make sure you address that on the front end. You also want to make sure that when you're talking to the caregivers, that they have the skill set that can handle what you're doing. So if you've got somebody that needs ambulation assistance, you want to make sure you've got a trained person, caregiver, that has done that before. They know how to do it safely. And so really identifying what the needs are and the amount of time adequate to do that is really important on the front end. And it can mitigate a lot of problems down the road with those caregivers. Then the other thing that I tell every family to look for and to at least identify amongst the family or whoever's involved in those care decisions is what I call personally deal breakers. So you could have a 90% match with a caregiver and really love their personality, and they could have all the skills that you're looking for and all the experience you need. And the deal breakers, to me, it could be maybe there's a pet in the home and the caregiver doesn't like to be around pets. It could be a smoking issue on either side of the equation with that. So those deal breakers, while they may be minor in an overall relationship, are the type of things that you want to identify on the front end to, again, avoid any of those issues on the back end. Because really what you're trying to do as a care seeker is find that continuity of care because the one thing you don't want is that revolving door of caregivers coming in, because that adds more stress to the family and to the loved one receiving the care.
When you talk a little bit about front end, what comes to mind to me is kind of maybe the front end of the website. Now, many in my audience are going to be very technologically savvy and understand a lot of this, but some might not. So walk us through a little bit about how we begin using the online system that you've created.
Okay, yeah, so HomeCareAssist.com, we have, of course, the front end page like you just mentioned, and that's going to have a lot of good information to help people get to the point that they're at that decision point to say, yes, we need to move forward with finding care. So they've utilized our resources and everything on our home pages. Once they've done that, it's real simple. You click on create a profile, you go in and you enter the information, and depending on the situation of the family or the individual, you're either looking for care for yourself or for a family member. So early into the profile, you identify that with us, so that we know, is it somebody that's managing the care for someone else, or is it that individual? So if you're managing it for someone else, you want to answer the questions in the profile according to that person's interest, who's going to be receiving the care. Because in our profile, we go a little bit deeper, and that's why I mentioned that it's more like an eHarmony versus a Match.com type thing, because we go pretty deep in the profile, because there's a lot more to finding a good match with in-home care than just finding the skills, the geography, and the pay rate. You want to look at compatibility on a personality level, and that's what our profile helps do. So you want to answer those questions for the person seeking the care and receiving the care. So it takes 15 minutes at the most to go through and complete the profile. Once you're done, you're going to be brought to a dashboard, which a lot of tech savvy people these days are very familiar with what a dashboard is. So you're going to see a very simple dashboard. All your matches are going to be brought to that person managing the care. So you're going to see your top 3 matches. We also show a percentage of how well they match. Once a connection request has been accepted, then the care seeker and the caregiver can then start messaging each other directly on our secure site. And that is where I always tell the users that you want to start negotiating what tasks need to be done, what the hours are, what type of pay you're going to be looking at, how often you want to pay the caregiver.
That's really helpful. Thank you. We're going to talk about pay in just a second, but I wanted to talk about the idea that there really is a preference with caregivers today. I found research that indicates, both AARP research as well as some other research that indicates that caregivers actually prefer to use these online services, and that gives them the advantage almost of understanding a little bit more about the breadth of coverage, the various costs involved, scheduling, compatibility, all those kinds of things. And if you wouldn't mind just briefly summarizing some of that research is almost preferential.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The caregivers are going more and more online to find their jobs. And what they like about that, and in the research I've read and the personal research I've done, is that they want to feel like they're in control of their career. Mm-hmm. So, when they go online, they can apply on the traditional online resources. They would apply for a job, and then they'd have to wait to hear back if if the care seeker was interested. With Home Care Assist, we're taking some of that stress and inefficiency out of that process. So the care seeker sends the connection request. Then the caregiver can look at that and decide, is this someone I want to work with? Are they too far away? Is the shift not long enough? Do the hours not meet what I'm looking for? And so that puts the control, it kind of ping pongs back and forth on who's got control, but throughout the process, both parties feel like they're in control. What we're seeing as a trend in this industry is that, over the next 20 years, there's going to be 10,000 or more people turning 65 every day. Mm-hmm. 90% of those individuals over 65 are more and more wanting to stay in home as they age. So the demand is growing, and what we're seeing is that the supply of caregivers is going to start dwindling over the next probably 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, there are so many unique aspects of caregiving, and so offering this kind of platform that allows for a two-party decision really gives a lot more flexibility. I see that myself, as a result of my own personal situation with my father. But I think, too, and we referenced this just a moment ago, Brian, and that is that cost is an issue here. So
Absolutely.
once we kind of get past this initial phase of the two parties kind of finding one another, me selecting a caregiver, the caregiver actually saying, yes, this is something I want to this is a service I want to provide for this individual. How do you pay?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because when you're, in this world with Home Care Assist, it's what we call private duty. So it's an individual relationship. It's a direct relationship between the care recipient and the caregiver. So, currently on Home Care Assist, the payment process has to be worked out between the two individuals. What typically has happened in this industry over the years, and has recently started to shift, is the caregivers are waiting for that paper check to come every week or every other week. The care seeker or care recipient has to remember to pay them. They have to verify their time, and it's one more step that they're having to do on an ongoing basis. And then at the end of the year, if the care recipients are doing their due diligence, they're also realizing that there might be some tax liabilities for that caregiver that they're responsible for. And, the average person may not know that, but it could be something that comes back to bite them later. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'm really excited about is we have just entered into a partnership with a national provider of, I call it payroll services, but it's on an individual level. Mm-hmm. And we've listened to feedback from our caregivers and our care seekers that, paying directly, while it may be a benefit on cost savings for the care seeker and higher pay rates for the caregiver, there's still that headache of facilitating the exchange of money, so that the care seeker or the family can go online through our website and they can finalize the week or the 2 weeks or however they've agreed to pay that caregiver, and do it all electronically. And this third-party vendor that we're using will handle any tax liabilities. They'll do direct deposit into the caregiver's account, so everything speeds up the process, and it takes all the stress of that payment process off the shoulders of both parties.
That can be a stress. We had that same kind of situation. We actually involved a local accountant that had been working with my parents to help us through that, because it was just a complex issue to sort through, and we didn't want to stumble, and we didn't want to not do it properly. And so it's very apparent that the site has an awful lot of resources. Brian VanHook, the founder and CEO of HomeCareAssist, thanks so much for joining us, and we'd love to have you back sometime and talk a little bit more about this.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the time, and any time I'll be happy to come back.
Thank you, Brian. My thanks to our guest today, HomeCareAssist CEO Brian VanHook. More information about, including links to HomeCareAssist and Brian VanHook, is available at our website. As I say, we'll post everything, and as I always say, my thanks to you, the listeners, for joining me today. I think this has been a really important subject, and I think we are all caregivers at one time or another. But your time is valuable, and I'm grateful you're spending some of it with me today. I'm always interested in feedback, and you can leave that at iTunes, Google Play, or send me email at info@notold-better.com. Stay tuned for our next show, another great one where we talk about better. The Not Old Better Show. Thanks, everybody.